Welcome, guys. Got a episode here that's dear to my heart. I've got Lee Ross, law enforcement, and we're going to talk about Lee's life story and the current status of law enforcement. First, Lee Ross. That's a very, very Southern name. Any roots there? Where were you born?
No, I was just given 3 first names after my grandfather. My dad just was traditional about it, just Lee Edward Ross. And people call me Lee, call me Ross, call me him. They're all first names. So,
Where were you born?
So I was born in Oklahoma City. I'm back in the 80s baby, and then kind of grew up mostly in Oklahoma, moved around a little bit in high school, and ended up moving to Texas for a little while, and then moved back to Oklahoma and graduated and started like my professional career of growing up and being an adult. It's kind of where it all began, I guess.
Started with the Marine Corps.
Yes. So I was not prepared for college, like a lot of probably kids are. And then it was like all of a sudden your senior year's there, and I wasn't ready. And it was kind of like that embarrassment of like, I don't know where I'm going. And so Marine Corps was always something I wanted to do, thought I could be a pilot, but I don't add very well, like a lot of Marines. So I ended up listening and going to the reserves, which actually is kind of twofold. Like you have, Marines and reserve Marines, and there's all like the inter-service rivalry within the service of it. But it was a blessing because I wanted to be an infantry Marine in Broken Arrow is a tow company for 0352s or tow missilemen, and they serve all 9 infantry battalions out of that one company. So it's an entire company of these guys. And then so whenever they go to AT or they go in deployment, they would then move out to wherever their infantry battalion is. I was 3rd Battalion, 23rd Marines. So our weapons company was out of Baton Rouge. So a lot of good Cajun boys coming from there for the weapons company, great machine gunners. Trust them with a lot of things, gumbo as well. But, it's kind of how it was, and it was a great experience for what it was. It fit my life well, and it hit at opportune times.
Trying to think of all the guys I served with from Louisiana, but only one really comes to mind. His name was Morphus. Grew up on a ranch in Louisiana. Mm-hmm. Big boy, handsome dude. Oh, the draw was bad. Sometimes you couldn't understand him, but that guy was a fighter.
There was a couple guys, you needed some subtitles to understand what it was that they were saying. But a lot of them were mostly LSU students. Like they were in Baton Rouge at the time, and one reason or another, they're, 3rd year in, they're like, I just joined the Marine Corps, I want to be a machine gunner for one day. And then back in school, and then they're in law school, and then they're in business school, as a Lance Corporal, which is like the oddness that is the Reserve Marines that when the active duty components come in, they're not used to that. Mm-hmm. They're used to 19-year-old Lance Corporals and, 20-year-old corporals and, being 19 and 20-year-old young men. And then you have a Lance Corporal who's 27 and a lawyer, but now he's, on deployment because that's what he has to do and stuff. So it was a unique experience for what it is, and kind of really like showcased how valuable a reserve component can be in theater. In there. So a lot of great lessons. When we finally deployed, it was at the tail end of the surge, so there really wasn't much to do as far as
08, 09?
07 to 08. So it was right at the tail end. So we were deployed with to the Haditha Triad region. So there's the dam in Haditha, and you got the Tri-City area, and pretty much the birthplace of civilization right there on the Euphrates. So it was really, really cool if you're a history nerd like I am. But being as in like there was really no anti-armor threat, they really didn't have a job for us. So we have a whole platoon of, tow missilemen. Like, what are we going to do? We're great with vehicles because we work with vehicles all the time. So convoy ops was our deal.
Yes.
We ended up getting snagged by the battalion commander, who was then, Lieutenant Colonel Bellin, who's now he's about to retire, but he's the current Mar 4 Res commander right now. Super great guy. And we just kind of took him from point A to point B everywhere. So it was a real unique experience from if you're going to be in a non-kinetic theater for being everything that it was up till then. it really kind of showcased the other half of warfighting, with that you really understand like the non-kinetic movements of the chessboard and the pieces and infrastructure and how important that is. And really, I just got a front row seat to that. And then rather than me and like a lot of the Marines, they were stuck in there, their cops or the EPBs, and had to do their their local patrols. We got to go to Fallujah, and we got to go to Baghdad, and we got to see different dignitaries and lead different things and get a real detached overall view of like
a master class.
Yeah, just and the whole 7 months of just what it's in there, and so the colonel, he was really open about like what it is we're doing, but then he was real private when he needed to be. He measured that really well, which is kind of hard to do when you work with people every day. You can lose that professionalism of what is the discipline of what we think of as the military and the Marine Corps, because at the end of the day, we're just humans. But when we made it work, and it was a really great experience for what it was. Like the only cool thing we ever did, like I ride home is, or I tell people about is we got a late night call. Colonel walks in the weight room. He's like, "Hey, I need you to get staff sergeant. We're going on a thing right now." Okay, I got the boys together. I'm going ready. Next thing, it's like a big to-do deal, and we're going to this place where we've been several times. And then halfway out there, we're going to stop. Some people are going to come and meet us up there. But like next thing, all I see is IR lights out of the sky. Like I don't hear anything. Like there's a bunch of wind. Next thing you know, it's just a dust cloud and a bunch of dudes, a dog, and their own prisoner. Everyone's named Mike. Like for me, like coming back in the fast forward in police work, and you get people like in the tactical world, and they start calling themselves operators. I'm like, if you did not fly in on a helicopter that didn't make noise and your name's not Mike, you're not an operator. That's like your standard, like to me, because these guys come off and they're like, "Hey, like I'm Mike. We're just here to do stuff," and just totally legit guys and there for a purpose. And they had on their forearm, iPad, real time. I thought it was cool because I had a map. At certain levels, you get to NCO, you get your little green book. You're important then.
Yes.
So then when you got a map, you feel even more important. Then you feel insignificant because it's not digital. It's before iPads and iPods are like really a huge deal at the time. So that was probably like the coolest thing we did as far as like operationally, because you just meet these guys and they came into their thing, and then more helicopters came in. They didn't make noise and they left, and it was it. Just a thing. It was in there.
Well, hopefully they were nice. No, respectful.
Really great dudes.
There you go.
Really helpful.
That's what I love. When guys like that are complete dicks, it really rubbed me raw. I mean, we were always highly respectful and kind of everyone we worked with, regardless of your rank, what you did in the military. That is a good theory in life. Mm-hmm. And it's also, I say it, be careful on the way up, because you're going to see the same people on the way down, and how you treated them on the way up. They're going to remember that when you reach out for help. But as cool as those guys are, it was usually the Marine Corps or Army had to come get them out in really bad situations. Bottom line, even 30 guys with 4 mags each can only sustain for so long. The reserves, I always thought that was a good deal, especially for like the special forces groups. Mm-hmm. I wasn't in the Army, but those guys that were special forces at the height of the war in the reserve groups, they'd be like, "Yeah, dude, I can just activate and go with 5th group over there, or 7th group or 3rd group, and basically attach on as a strap hanger and serve my role." But then even I met some guys in the JSOC world that were SF reserve and just screened and made it into JSOC and just activated, and great dudes, man. Smart.
Yeah, JSOC was just beginning like in that time period, because it was just recon Marines are in there and you had to go through the indoc process. And what a lot of people don't understand about the reserves, like you're limited to like your geographical area of what's available. And so like there's a lot of guys in Alaska and in San Antonio, because that's where the recon battalions are for the reserves. Or, so like if you're not there, you got to make a contract to travel to those places.
Yes.
And,
yes.
But once you get those, you come from active duty, you have those quals, like you can be a strap hanger, and like your world's limitless, because there's always needing people. Like there's no shortage of needing good people.
You said something earlier, I'm going way back here, which is like I'm told is a no-no in podcasts, but fuck it. It's my podcast. You said you weren't prepared for college. Nor was I. I think my parents had the financial resources to send me, and I pissed that money away And before my dad could get my hands on me, I withdrew from all my classes because I was
It had
going
to
to
be a
flunk some
little
of
bit
them.
of fun. For a little while.
I raged. I raged and attended very few classes, and I skied my ass off. There's a lot of kids that go to college that aren't prepared for college either. I'm a fan of kids should go work for 4 years before they go back to college. If kids, one, they're going to gain a lot of life experience, a lot of maturity. They're going to understand having to pay for their bills. But if you started as a freshman at 22, and this was basically for the Marine Corps. I mean, I joined the Marine Corps after a very short stint in college, went back at, let's see, how old was I? I was 23 when I went back to college.
Totally
Finished, I was a Marine. Finished in 3 years with a 3.7 GPA. I got a 2.9 in high school and didn't even graduate with my senior class. I'm a big fan of that, and I know General McChrystal's actually advocated for kids going to do like mandatory government service, whether it's military or some part of the federal government, also to spur on a little bit of nationalism in a good way, love for country, while paying it back. But there's a lot of kids that just get to go to college and just
I think
slide by, and their parents have the financial resources to do it.
Well, I think some like kids benefiting now and making more successful in school are things that you and I didn't get to benefit from, like which No Child Left Behind, that put a lot of resources and funding into schools to help with like a lot of identifying learning disabilities. Where you and I, it was you're not paying attention enough.
Yeah, like, I want to be outside. I want to go drink. I want to go party. I want to go like surf or jump off a bridge.
So like when it's a maturity, like some of these things you can grow out. And when you get professionalism, you see, okay, here's my drive. That's what I needed in here. But like a lot of the kids, like they're like, hey, actually, you're dyslexic. That's why you don't enjoy reading. That's why you listen really well. But that's not what is good for the school environment for what it was at the time. And I just wasn't like the straight A student kid. And I didn't get in a lot of trouble or anything, but it was just like I was not your A+ guy. Like, don't copy off my test. It was just kind of one of those things. I was just a mediocre and in the middle. I wasn't super successful. I wasn't bad, so I was just in that group. Like, hey, you're graduating. Like I kind of conned my way through it.
It wasn't a lack of aptitude or intelligence. It was just you weren't focused. Nor was I. Yeah. And I'll say it. The Marine Corps does a very good job of taking an 18-year-old boy or girl off the streets and turning them into a man or woman. And you have to be a professional soldier, or you're going to have a real rough time in the Marines or the military for a whole. But at what point did you decide law enforcement was the route you wanted to go?
Yeah, I think it was really crafted from the Marine Corps in that like just sense of purpose. And I think what I had not had and what the Marine Corps is so great about is its infrastructure and building its culture. Like I think that's what separates it from a lot of the other services is, they call it like, the cult building, and, you read these other, listen to other guys in other services, like you guys are just a different breed. You guys are just in here and like what it is. And what I think really what it is from day one, when you get there, it is impounded upon you. Like this was made by someone else giving their life for, like, don't take it lightly. And that's every day in there in the history. And, like when you go through the crucible, every event is after a Medal of Honor recipient, Navy Cross recipient at minimum, and you just hear these things that they've done. And like that's what is always on your shoulders of just you're not going to let that down. Like this is the heritage that you bring. And so that really shaped a lot of my professionalism and just follow through and understanding, like say what you're going to do and, do what you're going to say. Yeah. Like if that's, what you want out of, not just professionals, but just out of good human beings. And creating that and giving them a chance to, to fail forward and mentor and craft. That's what I think has been excellent about the Marine Corps, which, shaped me into that. But then, you get out of the Marines, especially as an infantryman, there's a lot of stereotypes. Like you're just going to do what you're told. Like you touched on that, like in your books, and, a lot of other authors have too. It's just like, you're going to do what you say because you're in the military and that's what you do, take orders. You're like, yeah, well, we're also a thinker. That's not how it works. And that was a really big adjustment when I came back from deployment, because that's when I went back to school and was doing better. Like I was actually serious and I was able to, okay, here's a craft, here's where a direction where I need to go. And it wasn't an obstacle anymore. It was a stepping stone. And, I was working as a civilian at a, university police department locking doors, like nothing awesome at all. And especially you go from fighting a war and leading Marines in combat patrols, and then I hear you're just locking doors on a university.
Yeah.
And like they want you to write the university ticket. And I was like, oh, not
that's a tough transition.
But it was humbling. It just allowed me to go to school and just get in the path. But getting back in 2008, that's like right when the recession happened. So no one's hiring. I had this trajectory. I was going to work for the Oklahoma City Police Department. A family went there. I wanted to go. Like I had it in there, and it didn't work out for me. So it's like, now what? Now what are you going to do? Are you going to give up? Like, is that who you are? Are you a quitter? And so I was like, no, I'm better than that. Like, there's other people and other opportunities, but it just really transitioned into one of the reasons why I love being a Marine is that I had an opportunity to defend those who can't defend themselves. You see that a lot, especially when you go on deployments, like you're like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? And you'll see that small town farmer girl who has nothing. They live on a dirt floor, but she's got carrots and she's offering some of those carrots to you because you just that wholesomeness. And you're like, okay, this is why, because there's people who want to hurt her, and I'm not going to let that happen if I have that opportunity. And it happens here too. And so it's kind of just carrying that same thing, that service into it.
It happens here more often than it happens over there. And that's what people get wrong is, we faced evil over there without a doubt. Mm-hmm. And it was sort of fun to eradicate the evil. And that doesn't make me a psychopath. Wow. There was a sense of purpose behind it. And I don't know why we shielded the American public from some of the videos that were recovered from direct action raids of the atrocities, much like October 7th. Mm-hmm. That the public should see that. The public should see that. And anyone who wants to be anti-Israel would, if they're a decent person, probably reevaluate their stance. Mm-hmm. But the amount of evil from human trafficking, child trafficking in this nation, to drug peddlers, to just rapists. I mean, we are in scary times, my friend. We are in very scary times. Mm-hmm. How was going through the police academy? Was that, I'm sure that one it's very academic.
So it is my personal experience. So I ended up, don't judge me. Okay. But so my first cop job was at the University of Oklahoma. I understand you're a UT fan. We're in neutral territory. We're fun. I get it.
A parochial school. Got it.
It is the university, by the way.
What do you say to that, Will? But you better get out of our state. You better go back to Oklahoma.
I love Texas, though. Like, that's the thing. But it is, it was a stepping stone. It wasn't where I wanted to be, but it was the opportunity I needed to be humbled and put in there, because I was like, Oklahoma City runs a very tough, rigorous training program, and I knew about it, and I wanted that. I wanted tough, and then it didn't work out for me there. So then for anyone who can't run their own program in that state, they go to a state academy, and it's all in Ada, Oklahoma, and it's the bare minimum. It's not what you desire, and it's like when you find out that some of these guys are chiefs in their towns, and it's like, this is even more scary. Like, it's rough. And so, so there's like a lot of that self-drive. You have to hold yourself to a higher standard, and then you learn the basic bare minimum there, and it's not challenging. It's just, can you take in information and apply it? And then the hardest part was really coming to realize that there's a difference between defending the Constitution and then working within the Constitution. Because when they wrote that thing, like, they knew what they were doing. Like, they made it tough. And so, like, when you go to have those interactions as the government to a citizen, and you're like, well, I don't know if I can't do that. And then you realize, like, how tough it is to, like, just to almost even communicate in some aspects. And so it really makes you, it becomes a thinking man's game or woman's game. And so that was tough, and just basic concepts of just barely touching into, they want you to be legal scholars, but
yes,
you got 12 weeks, at this point. And then if you're lucky, you got your own agency would have an extended training program for, liability purposes and things that you want, if they're organized, right, and then they're accredited and they know what's going on.
So I was going to ask that. So you continue to
it's ever
pile
evolving
into legal Constitutional rights.
Every time a case is decided, things come down, like what you could do one
lessons
day.
learned.
Yeah, well, what you could do one day, you can't do the next because now this decision came out. Like a small thing is in 2013, 2014, SCOTUS or Supreme Court ruled that, searching someone's phone incident to arrest is no longer allowed because they hold so much more data than what they used to. It's not just messages. It's, all kinds of personal effects. And whereas before is like before they were, put into jail, you could go through their phone. You could look at their messages. Like there was a lot of information you would get from drug dealers. You'd arrest them on a valid charge and then go through their phone and be like, okay, well, cool. Here's a phone number we now need to pay more attention to. And then that ruling came out. Okay, we can't do that anymore. And so now it's like, what is the way that we can do that? And a lot of people, they get upset. Well, SCOTUS, they take this away. I was like, well, no, it's what it's intended for. Like that's the Constitution at work. Like as the times evolves, we have to evolve with it. But so I ended up coming down to, I didn't want to stay at OU for the rest of my life. It just wasn't the type of police. Yeah. I learned a lot. I learned a whole different level, a whole different demographic. Ended up taking an opportunity to lateral to the Irving Police Department in Irving, Texas. Thought I was really impressed to really run fiscally well. Just the culture at that time of what they were wanting to do just wasn't consistent with my beliefs as a person. And just kind of, if you worked hard and you caused problems, like you were given problems. And that was just kind of like not what I signed up for. Like I was just doing things with good intent, what I thought was aggressive policing that was within the rules and within the confines. But then I felt like I was constantly being told like, hey, well, you're not doing it right the way I see it. And that's when you start getting into like that, well, what's the rule? Like what's the standard? And then are we going to hold to that standard? And then you just see who's going to get promoted around you. And then you're like, okay, this isn't for me anymore. And you make changes, and that's.
I've got to assume there's a lot more politics within promotions within law enforcement than there is in the military.
So in some agencies, yeah, like sheriff's departments can be really politicky, because it's an elected office and things. Where in Texas, is really great with Civil Service Commission. And it's like there's a standard, like there's a set way by law how it has to be conducted, and all the rules right there. Like it's not a hide and seek game to anyone. So basically boils down to a written test that's in there, and you get certain points for veteran status and stuff. And so a lot of people study hard for there, which breeds its own problems, but it's at least some sort of a fair metric that people can use. So that's how a lot of departments are as far as like those types of promotions. But when it comes to appointments is where it gets real politicky, because the chief can appoint technically whoever he wants. Like he's the chief. And that's where you start seeing some Game of Thrones stuff start happening, for people.
I think that's any organization. Do cops, police officers roll their eyes at sheriffs sometimes? Like, oh, here we go.
I don't see it. Like we don't really see our sheriff's deputies much,
Yeah.
Well, it's because where I'm at is just we do with like the warrant squads and stuff because they'll ask for like any help, but like we really don't see a whole lot of them. But they're more in the rural areas. But like the city of Fort Worth spans 5 counties. And they're like
12th largest city in the nation, correct?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it was.
That shocked me. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's expansive. Like they can't build fast enough, dude. It's insane. Texas. Yeah,
thanks to all those Californians and New Yorkers.
Yeah, everyone coming around.
Stay in your state. Per capita, do you think guys coming out of the military do a lot better as police officers?
So I like to get one of the passions like getting into law enforcement was creating your successor, and you can't complain about the generation coming after you if you're not willing to invest yourself into them.
Damn straight.
So training was my big thing that I like to do, but stay relevant and like if they're failing, then it's because I failed to teach them, and so that was a big thing into it. And so when I started diving more into the training aspect. Prior service was great because you didn't have to deal with the why are they telling me what to do. They're like, okay, well, they're in charge for right now, and this is what you do. It's just part of it. Like the threat of why is a lot less there to a point. But where it gets really hard is that sometimes they can have that active aggressive, bias for action, which is awesome and creates situations. But then that's where you really have to talk to them like, hey, you took an oath to defend the Constitution in this area. But now here we have to not defend it, but we also have to work
We have
within
different
it.
constraints.
Like, so it's really teaching that concept that gets tough because in the military we think like, okay, hey, I can go do this just because. And it's, you know, it's much different. That's why there's the, you know, the UCMJ versus the regular law. You know, they create new rules for it because they can circumvent certain things in that environment. And so just that's where you start really trying to teach them like, hey, how much can we learn about the problem and figure out without fighting? Because we win 100% of the fights we don't fight. So, you know, before we have the conflict, does it even have to take place? Or are there, you know, non-kinetic movements that we can...
How can we de-escalate this, which is, I know, always a priority for you guys. So, huge fan of law enforcement. Got police officers within our families. My grandfather was a lead detective in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Got a cousin who's on the SFPD,
Tough
Oakland
place right
PD.
now.
Somebody reached out and they're like, "Hey, would you come talk to a group of San Francisco PD?" And it was pretty recent. I'm like, I don't know what I would say to them. I honestly, I'd probably come in and be like, "Hey, you guys need to contact local PDs in Texas and get the hell out of this city." Because anything I would tell them, I couldn't, in good conscience, like keep a straight face. In our family's been in San Francisco since 1899. Beautiful city.
Beautiful.
It is a disaster by design right now, and bad leadership equals bad policies, which equal bad outcomes. And the fact that I texted my dad when I saw San Francisco at one point, and I don't know if they moved forward with this, we're going to pay criminals $500 a month
to not commit crime. But all you're doing is just any entrepreneur sees like, I got $500 operating expenses.
I'm like, hey, how do I like register within San Francisco as a, how do I get that $500?
Yeah, no, it is. I think nationally, when we talk about law enforcement, like what is the problem is that we've already started complicating the issue because many people don't understand police departments are locally funded. You know, 90 to 95% of, you know, police departments are funded by the local populace that's in there. So like the national trends aren't there. So it's like, what is more important to your area? And that's kind of what makes policing so intimate is that, you know, there is no one size fits all. Like there's the general sizes of the confines that we have to do and we can restrict and do that. But like your tribe, basically, like your culture gets to decide whether or not
You're funded.
this is accepted.
Yes.
You know, like, is this behavior going to be allowed? And that's kind of what we've seen in you know, other areas where it's kind of like, you know, in Seattle for all the problems like those officers are having to deal with. But like when they had the whole Chad incident, that's weird. Like they by not doing anything, they allowed, you know, someone trying to secede a portion of Seattle as their own place. And the first thing they did was erect barriers and checkpoints, things that they were absolutely against. And it's like, you know, where or how long are we going to allow this problem to fester? Are we going into when does de-escalation become an escalating problem? And then, so it's a difficult thing.
It's less de-escalation. It's more pandering.
I'm sorry.
It's more pandering. So let's step back.
Yes, sir.
The George Floyd incident was catastrophic to law enforcement across the nation.
It was a rough summer.
It's tragic what happened. Are there bad Marines in the Marine Corps?
Absolutely.
100%. Navy, Army, Air Force. I don't know anything about Space Force, so I couldn't tell you. Bad things happen. There are rotten apples in any organization.
Yeah.
And I hate when people paint with broad brushstrokes. And even a family member of ours posted something that said, was all cops are bad, whatever the acronym is. And my wife had an allergic reaction to that. And I did too. And I'm like, hey, I'm not even going to pay credence. So, you know, again, coming from the military, I always had a high degree of respect for law enforcement and firefighters. Anyone who runs towards a burning building has my respect. It's like if you had a bomb, you're like, EOD guy up, we'll be 200 meters out. Let us know how it goes.
Yeah.
But that was catastrophic. The media did not help. You had the Black Lives Matter, which was very anti-law enforcement. Recruiting is down. and cops are leaving in groves, and I don't blame them. I've said it publicly. I don't know why anyone would join law enforcement these days, because the cards are already stacked against you. You can't win. Even when you do your job, somebody has a cell phone that's out, and it's how they chop that video, how they send it in, or only get the portion where you're going fisticuffs with a perp, and you're in the wrong, and they don't have the context.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you guys feel like you've been criminalized in a sense?
No, I think where I work right now is probably one of the most pro-policing
communities.
I mean, as it's just they're just pro being good people and supporting good people. Like, you know, what happened with George Floyd in Minneapolis, and the whole thing was tough and tragedy, and there's a lot of things that probably could have been done better, but they didn't allow the process to work for what it was on how it was in there. A lot of emotion, and I think that race is one of those things that's easy to get emotional behind. You know, our country has been very divisive in that, and very key points of our, you know, structure and building and things that we've gone through. And like, I don't know one police officer who's like, yeah, let's go be racist today. Like, that's, if anything, that's like the one thing like we would all root out. Like, no one wants to get out a bad cop more than a good cop. And so dealing kind of with someone with that, you know, that was tough. People were emotional, and I totally got it. Like, they were upset, they were mad, and there was some things that came up, and it all came in at one point with COVID and people not having jobs. They had free time, and then when you have free time, like especially now the summers, a lot of education people are in there, and you know, it's really easy to get behind. And I understood it, I empathized with it, but I also didn't pay for almost a single lunch that whole 2 months we were, you know, dealing with our issues in our area because
within Fort Worth.
Because, you know, people, yes. Like there's times where people are like, hey, I want to buy this meal, and someone's like, no, like 4 people ago paid for it. And so like that's how you really know like you're being supported and you're out there. And even in like the clashes like we had, it was just people were upset. They wanted better. They wanted a better standard for it. And you can't blame anyone for wanting better. And I mean, that's how we get better. But like it also wasn't what was happening in our area. But Fort Worth has had its own turmoils and things to get through, and the only way we've continued to get better, and you know, I was a really big advocate after some key incidents happened, is like we had to have tough conversations, and we got to be willing to look people in the eye and say, hey, you know, we can agree to disagree, you know. But I don't think BLM was so much an anti-cop thing, but it was just people just wanted to be heard and respected and felt. You know, I have personal disagreements with the way that, you know, some of the viewpoints got put across. In that I feel like, you know, going back to, I feel like there's really good people in the BLM movement, and then there were some people who really took advantage of, especially when I got to the donations of monies and misappropriations of the donated funds and stuff. And that's just sad, you know, and the whole thing that came out of it. But would be the bigger tragedy is if we don't learn from it so we can be better in the future. You know, it's kind of like what's the long play here? Like, here's the problem. Like, are we going to worry about what happened yesterday, or are we going to try and figure out what's going to be better for tomorrow? And that's how in Fort Worth, how I really think we got better. And it was just having being able to take the time to have the conversation. You know, policing was, for a long time, was ask, tell, make. I mean, that was a training. Like, you're going to ask him, then you're going to tell him, and you're going to make him. And that was like it. And if you didn't do that, like in the culture, it was like you can't handle your business. But then it's like, man, like maybe take a second and like say, hey, like, and explain why. I'm like, that's a very normal human thing. But for so long, it was like, no, you're going to ask him, you're going to tell him, you're going to make it. And it's like that. It definitely has its place, especially when situations turn kinetic and, you know, you don't have the luxury of time. Like, that's a total give out. So it has its place. But I think that if we're going to want, you know, the better benefits and the better pay, then we need to step up to a better standard. And that's just like, we can't say we want more, we need to be compensated more, but we're not willing to improve. Like, that's just asinine. And so that's where like it goes back into the training academy. And then what are we injecting into our youth? And are we projecting what it is that we want, which goes back into who are we hiring? You know, like, that's a great question. Like, who would want to be a cop? Like, you really got to be a person who cares right now. If you want to be a cop, like you got to care more than anything. You got to care, and then you not give up and like undersee it. And you see the fruits of your labor. Like you get in your good first chase and you put that case together, you get your guy, you do this, or you really help that victim and you get it. Like it's rewarding. It's addicting. And, and like when you see like in there for like all the 99 calls that you get, they're like, oh, this is annoying. When you get that 100th one and it's in it and you really saved a life, you made a difference. And you're like, wow.
That fills the soul.
Oh yeah. And it does. And it gets purpose driven. And then once you start seeing like, oh, okay, so like if we just continue to do it the way we always done, we're not going to improve. Like what resource can we do now? And, Chief Brown, former, I think he's in Chicago now, used to be over Dallas. When he was making his exit out of Dallas, there's a lot of things that he ran his police department that I didn't personally agree with. But when he made a speech afterwards, like at the end of it, one I really agreed with is like police are being called for things that aren't police problems. Like you're having a mental health episode, and call the police. Your kid's not listening to you, call the police. And he was like, that's there's not enough of us. We're hiring. Like if you don't like what you're getting, like we're hiring. Like you're gonna have to put up or shut up. And so I really agreed with that. And that's kind of like where you challenge and you put that back on the community. Like if you want these changes, you got to invest in with it. And that comes in multi phases. It doesn't mean that, you have to go work for the police department, but there's, I found a lot of resources is like, hey, here's a nonprofit you can work with. You're having issues with, job hunting or your basic needs getting met. Here's these other city resources that are funded. And then a lot of cities, I don't think, take advantage of enacting like a 0.5-cent sales tax. And I'm not a proponent of adding taxes, but what has allowed Fort Worth to be so successful in we have what's called the CCPD, and I can't name out what it is, but basically it's a 0.5-cent sales tax that goes towards public safety training gear funding. So every recruit that we hire is paid through this 0.5-cent sales tax.
That's a tax I can get behind.
Yeah,
because you know where it's going.
Yeah, you know where it's going, but it's not just for if you drive through and you buy gas, that person's doing it. And so we have an influx of up to 3 million people that travel through Fort Worth daily. So every purchase that's made in Indiana, like a part of that goes in there, and it's a pretty good revenue thing. A few years ago when I was on the budget committee, and you were hearing how what's the income of CCPD, and in this revenue or in this quarter, we're revenue like around $115 million. It's not all just to police and fire for equipment and, we're not buying Bearcats and machine guns with it, but it's a lot of this is also like, what are some of the social programs for victims assistance? What about youth programs like that can help bring structure to that family home? There's a program, a commander who I worked really close with. He's the commander of our East Division now. It's called Handle with Care. And basically what it is just a form of notification that if, you if you make an arrest, if you're forced to make an arrest, and it can be any sort of something, whether it's use of force or it was just a bad domestic and a child is around, like, just because children are there, like they don't ever get to escape it, that you can fill out this form, and then that there's intervention counselors in the school system and in the community that like, okay, we know that this is up. Now they're able to intervene at school, because problems that I think we really overlooked was, the chaos that they're coming at, with their home, and then they come into school and they're acting out on it. And it's like, where's their sanctuary? Yeah. And it's really taken off. It got a lot of help with the state legislature recently and to be broadened out. But I mean, it's simple things like that. Like that's also what it goes to fund. It doesn't just buy, SWAT gear and equipment. Like it helps, but it's not all that it goes to. And I think a lot of cities can take advantage of something simple like that to fund some of those funding shortfalls. Like here in Austin, like they eliminated a recruit class like that was almost finished, and then now they're trying to be incentives to make up for this gap. It's manpower is a tough problem, and it's 18 months minimum to get your bare basic police officer.
A great lesson from the Vietnam War. And who was I talking to? I was talking to a Vietnam vet. And he basically said I was somewhat infuriated and also jealous of our generation that we came home to a welcoming, thankful nation. But for the listeners, the viewers, I don't miss an opportunity if I'm walking by a police officer or a fireman to say, hey, thank you for what you do. That simple phrase, thank you for what you do, can fill their cup for a day, maybe a week. Now, if everyone was doing that and getting behind their law enforcement, I think, that doesn't solve a lot of problems, but they know they've got the support of the populace. We are in a time where an illogical time where we are cutting you guys off the knees, and it's not necessarily Texas, but I'll use my home state, California. I consider myself a Californian in exile in Texas. I now tell people I was born in.
There's a lot.
I tell people I was born in Frisco,
Texas. Yeah.
Will reminds me I'm not. But I actually did go to 2 Texas universities. He only went to a private. He went to Baylor. He went to a private school. That doesn't even count. Is these policies of they can steal up to $1,000 of goods and basically walk away. Oh, yeah. These mass looting scenarios where these kids rush an Apple store, they rush a convenience store. It comes down to behavior, and we all know this. We know this well in the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. You either incentivize good behaviors or you disincentivize bad behaviors. And we are incentivizing that it is okay to commit crimes to a certain level and it will not be prosecuted.
Yeah, I think it's a really key point. Like, it's a 3-prong approach. Like, you have the police interaction, and then you have the district attorney's interpretation of what they're going to enforce and how they're going to prosecute it and the rules of evidence and things that they're going to go through. And then you have judges who will set low bonds for, repeat offenders.
That kills me, man.
That's the thing, is like, judges can't, they're immune. Like, you can't, there's not really much you can do. And anytime you ever ask, is there anything you do? Like, no, they're a judge. Like, that's literally the response of any, attorney I've ever had. Anything. But like, Dallas had a problem with it, that the DA who had taken over, I forget his name, he came in office, he's like, we're not going to prosecute anyone with a theft under $750. We're not going to prosecute.
So the reason stated?
They just weren't going to do it. It was like kind of like a decriminalization, kind of like when New York is kind of done. Only it was 3-4 years earlier, and it's like, what were people doing? They would go to CVS's and Targets and steal $748 worth of stuff, and then they would go back the next day and do it. And like, hey, like, we're setting a tone here. Like, we can arrest them all day long, but like, what's going to happen like on the long part? Like, I can't tell you how many times I've arrested people on ankle monitors and they're on bond for murder.
But the impacts on law enforcement, it not only do you become lethargic, you become disengaged. It's almost like, why? Why should I even get out of my car, or why should I even?
That's kind of like the problem where we're really seeing it. We always focus on policing, like the police aren't doing anything. It's like, man, I got a cost benefit analysis. Like, I got a career here. Like, not only do I got to think on like a safety aspect, like I got to think career safety,
kids, family,
all that, and then like one bad thing goes wrong, now the discipline process and accountability. I think that's something that we've really gotten wrong recently, and that's where it's like the upper level management of leadership is the big push is accountability, and they've equated that to discipline versus like, hey, your uniform's not in regulations. You understand that there's a standard reset. Could you make sure that I don't have to ask you that again? Like, that's accountability. Nothing goes in there. And a lot of places it starts like that, but then when it's the repetitiveness, and especially at larger agencies, now we have blanket policies, and those are the ones like the axe just gets fallen on the hammer, and next thing you know,
public execution.
Oh man, and it's just blanketed, and it's under the guise of, well, we're just holding people accountable. And it's like, well, if you have to hold this many people accountable, at what point are the people above them? Like, there's an issue. Like, it doesn't always just fall on the lowest person. Like, what's the middle part? Just like in the Marine Corps, is like, if you have a sergeant who like his junior Marines are constantly in trouble, at some point you're like, hey, sergeant, like, you are in trouble. Like, these are your Marines. Like, I'm crushing you now. And then that's how it starts to roll downhill. But at some point, like, we're not always all responsible. We have the outliers. Like, there's bad cops. Like, if it's anything in policing that I've learned is that nefarious and ill intentions is in every demographic. It doesn't matter. We focus a lot on like lower income areas because that's where like the sexy stuff that gets put in movies, the foot chases and things like that. But I can't tell you how many gross crimes that are happening in your neighbor's house, and you just don't know it, and it goes and just silenced, and it's in there, and those are the sickest ones, because they look like you and I. Like, what does crime look like? And that's the hardest part when you teach someone. It's like, what's a bad guy look like? Like, this isn't Sims. Like, we don't have things above our heads that say, like, it's it. Like,
they come in all shapes, sizes, colors.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you this. I do like Fort Worth. There's just something about Fort Worth. And it's so funny. Fort Worth is right next to Dallas, and they are almost polar opposites. But you've got a good police chief. He's a stud. You can tell he's a good man. He's driven by...
Genuinely one of the best guys I've ever met. And I told Sully this right before I introduced him when he had made a site survey.
And Sully has been on the podcast. Andrew Sullivan, retired SEAL, now leading C1
Community First Project. Is his deal. Great supporter with that. I'm trying to actually bring him down to do some work with us. But when I introduced him, to our chief, I was like, listen, this guy listens so well that it bothers me. Like, and there's not a lot of leadership you can run into now these days where you can talk and they will listen till you're done, because there's a lot of interjectings, or they're listening to respond. And he's
contemplating. You can tell he's trying to formulate. One, he's trying to assess and understand and formulate his response.
Yeah,
and there's a composure about him where the other chiefs were just shooting out comments.
Yeah, and a total natural thing, because they're in here. But what I think it separates him, and it adds to his genuineness, and why I think he's so successful, like doing what it is he's doing, is that he's genuine what he does, and he means what he says, and he'll listen to you the whole time. I know for a fact he will disagree with you on things, and he'll stick to it. So he's easy to work for, because he's going to listen to you, but at the same time, he has his views. And I think that he's the only chief I've ever, in my entire 16 years going in police work now, where I've ever seen someone demote someone at appointed ranks. And that's just kind of something that's unheard of in the industry, because it's just kind of a taboo thing. Mm-hmm. Like they don't want to be, it's
it also draws eyes on you.
Most things, but he appointed people, and then he unappointed them. What that did was set the tone. Is it's not just the guys at the bottom, in there. Everyone's going to be held to a performance standard in what I deem as fit, and those are private conversations. And he made those decisions for his reasons, and he gets to do that. But what I think it helps with is that, okay, there's accountability at all levels. We all got to show up to game day, and we all know what the rules are ahead of time. That sometimes with my peer group, I get frustrated with some of the things that they say. I'm like, hey, you guys knew the rules before you got here. This wasn't a whodunit. No one just said, hey, it's all of a sudden changed now. You guys know what your expectations are, and your expectation is to come and give it your best every day, because my life's on the line. Especially working in the violent crime unit that I do, we work in teams, and I was on a real successful team, and I'm promoted, so I've moved somewhere else, and I'm going through different transitions. But the one I was on, we were so close, because we all had that our team motto was play for keeps. We will work with whatever the situation is, but we're not gonna sacrifice on safeties, morals, and ethics. And that really, I think, allowed us to be successful, because we became well-rounded. We played to each other's strengths and weaknesses. We molded it. We weren't all trying to be knuckle draggers. We all had our places, and we all could support that. And, we were just absolutely crushing it for what it was. And that's just one facet of it. And you had, 5 other teams doing the same thing in their areas. And what they're doing is just, there's just a lot of work right now. And COVID really kind of influxed that, because so much of what we deal with is youth problems that lost structure when they lost school. And a lot of parents were calling us because their kids are acting out. They're like, I don't know where he's getting this. But these are the same kids that are acting out in school. And, and it's this kid drives me insane. I was like, well,
not my lane of expertise.
It comes in, it's this is this isn't a new problem. But I think now you're just seeing it, and it's faceted, and times and culture is different. That's a huge deal. Music culture is really big with people, and when they make certain music about things, they have to go out and prove it, or they either have to have proved it before they can talk about it. Reputation's everything, and that's kind of the decaying of it.
And just to get granular there, you're talking about anti-law enforcement type.
Not just law enforcement, just criminal behavior.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. it's not just too rap music specific, but it's, you know, it's where we see it a lot in there, and it's very impactful with these kids. You know, music is a passion to them. It's a language, and I think we're losing out by capitalizing on that and creating programs that can maybe help do that in a more positive way. But, you know, at the same time, we can't save everyone. But we only have so many resources. We're short. Like every police department is short. It's like, what can we really affect, and what decision are we going to make? And then when we do that, are we going to have an upper management level that's going to be able to advocate and stand up to the public and be like, no, like, this is the ugly part of it. Like, I'm sorry it came out, but this is necessary. Our officers were in the right. They followed the policy. They followed the laws, rather than pandering to, well, we'll take it under review and we'll accountable. Like, I think that's again something I really like about our chief. There's been times where he's stood up and said, no, like, this is the officers did the right thing. And there's been times where he's like, we're fixing it.
That's rare.
In the industry, it's become rare, which is odd.
Did you see well, first off, you say music, it's interesting. I remember it was, I think 1994, 1995, Ice-T came out. Mm-hmm. He created a rock band, if you remember. I think one of the songs was Cop Killer.
I don't remember it specifically.
So I remember it was playing on the radio, and I was in my room, and my dad heard that, came in. I felt that one good. That song never played again, but his father was also a career police officer, detective. Mm-hmm. Funny enough, I mean, great stories from his dad, because this is San Francisco in the 60s. He was dealing with the Black Panthers. Mm-hmm. were pretty prominent in that area, Oakland and San Francisco at the time. You know, I think in my perspective, a layman outside perspective, but someone understanding come from the military, twofold here. One, the legal system has to be, and when I say zero tolerance, we've got to believe that people make mistakes, mm-hmm. and they are redeemable. Mm-hmm. But when somebody shows a continual habit of, let's say, committing aggressive crimes against other people, whether it's assault, you know, mm-hmm. there's got to be a point where you're like, hey, this person is not fit. They belong in jail to the full extent of the law. But we also, in media, if media is going to hone in on the negative on police mm-hmm. officers, they also have to show the positive. Mm-hmm. I mean, in some outlets are good about this, but if it doesn't bleed, it doesn't lead. We all know that within the media world, and the media goes right to the negative because mm-hmm. it creates drama, and people are attracted to drama like a train that's about to go off the rails. The great stories have to come out. They have to be told, and we've got to be appreciative. I mean, it's the law of the land. Mm-hmm. Follow the laws. Not all of them make sense. But when a police officer approaches you and asks you to comply. But even my grandfather told me, once you get to the precinct, don't say anything. We'll get you a lawyer. And that was coming from a career cop. He's like, don't say anything.
Yeah, right. And the rules are the rules. Like, they're all out there. I think where a lot of cops, they hurt themselves is how they start the interaction. They talk with people. And, you know, like, I think respect is the number one thing. Like, you can do, and you can do it respectfully, and then you can dust them off if it had to be aggressive in the beginning. But like, going to your point about, like, you know, the good stories have to be told. I'll put the ownership on the industry and departments themselves that, you know, cultures are built on the stories that we tell. We have not been doing a good job at telling our stories, and
using social media
or misusing it, trying, you know, like, they're wondering why recruiting's down, but some of the videos they get put out, it's like these dancing things or stuff. And like,
we talked about this.
Yeah. Although, like, it could be funny to be entertaining, but the thing is like, no one is going to work for someone if they're going to feel like a joke. Like, who wants that? Like, that's just, no, they look like a joke. And like, that's the damningness of it. And I'm like, again, that's what, again, brings me back to my Marine Corps roots of it, is like, every year, every Marine looks forward to the birthday message from the commandant. And every year it's a 15-minute video of just awesomeness. And it just really strikes the chord. And like, the key moment from this last one was that, you know, discipline will be the currency we use to trade, you know, for our trust. And we're, you know, like, our mission is to fight and win our nation's battles. Well, what's our mission is policing. Like, let's define it. Some mission statements are 4 paragraphs. Like, what are we here to do? And just being more clear about it and telling that, like, we can't be so shy to say, like, hey, we did a good thing. Because that was the thing. It's like, hey, it's your job. Like, what are you going to gloat about it? Like, yeah, we do that. Why are you talking about it?
It's sort of the antithesis to what dude, my team, they're like, hey, you need to be more personal on social media. Am I correct? They remind me all the time. They're like, hey, you need to show more. I'm like, no. If you look at my social media, it is all business. It's the podcasts. It's maybe a legacy expeditions thing. Maybe it's me giving a speech. That's it. I don't want people to see beyond that. Not that there's anything to see. They'd actually see that I'm pretty boring. I go home with my wife and my dog, which almost bit you.
Total normal dog thing.
But I've got to assume with the George Floyd incident, that must have been a wake-up call to law enforcement that, like, oh, we need to engage with the community a lot better.
The problem was well identified, and everyone's trying to make a new thing for us. So this is so I was involved in a critical police incident where my team was involved in a shooting, and it was in it was in the east side of Fort Worth. It was a really big deal for really big reasons. Like, no one's arguing at that point, but it's how are we going to handle this, and are we going to allow the process to get the prize, which is justice and upholding? Like, were things done correctly, and if not, are we going to appropriate that, or are we going to pursue that in the appropriate venue, whether administratively or criminally? Like, that's a very simple statement a department can be made. Like, hey, it is assumed our officers did the right things for the right reasons because we only train the right way to do things. Like, what agency would ever admit that they knowingly trained the wrong way to do it? So it's assumed that they did that. However, in the light of transparency, we're going to investigate this criminally and administratively. And if any wrongdoings found, we'll pursue it in the appropriate venue, which is justice. Like, that's the process. But it's, when you get put into that position, like, those things come in, you got to be willing to stand and make those points and put trust in that. And that's where, like, people just want to know that it's going to be taken care of. It's going to be taken care of right and professionally. Yeah. But then when we're wrong, we got to tell on ourselves. Like, anyone I ever work for, I always say, you'll never hear about anything I did wrong without hearing from me first. You got to tell on yourself first, but we also got to praise ourselves. We brings back to the Marine Corps. You read, meritorious mass citations for Lance Corporals who just did a good deed for the day, but it reads like, they won the Battle of Antietam, but it's just the way that it's written. And I feel like we can do it that way, and we can promote that culture, and we can say, hey, here's some things that are happening, but are we going to take the time to do it? Because again, short staff, it's a lot of work, a lot of things coming on. There's always a fire to go and get to. What city was it? The chief of police, it's a major city. I don't know if it was Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. They said they won't be responding to calls between 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. just due to the short staffing. I think it was Philadelphia. It was a major play, and they're like, hey, between 3 and 7, phone calls only, and when the first guy gets on at 7, they're going to go to it. Which again, like, that's a real staffing problem. Like, do you realize how embarrassing it must? The bravery. He's like, I've got to go publicly on TV and announce this. Yeah, he's like, FML. Yeah, that must have sucked, but it points to the fact that this problem needs to be fixed quickly, and it starts with the legal system. It starts, and I hate to say it's marketing. We've got to market much like the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps is if hands down the best. Any other service when it comes to advertising, like, they just slay it all the time. Or any company advertises like the Marine Corps, they will see a uptick in their recruiting. Yeah, and I've talked about it before. The best Marine Corps advertisement I ever saw, and I saw it as a young kid, had a picture of a DI yelling at a kid. And it says, "We're not promising you a rose garden." Mm-hmm. The United States Marine Corps. I had that poster in my room when I was the proud Marines. Yeah. When just short something like even when you look at the commercials, it's maybe the sound of hands slapping an M1 Garand, some solemn music, and just we're Marines. You know, it's just like it comes out there. And so it's like, you know, if you're going to be about it, be about it. But like going back to your thing, like George Floyd, like a problem you got, like solution about it, we called it community oriented policing in the 90s. Like that was what it was. And if, you know, the reason why I brought up my CPI is that what that forced me to do, you know, at an age I'm, you know, ashamed to admit, like it forced me to start reading, like, and being passionate about like in that part. And so first real book I read in a long time that wasn't for a grade was General Mattis's book, Call Sign Chaos. And it just mapped it out in there. And, you know, you get to the part where he's talking about, you know, him and General Petraeus rewrote, you know, the counterinsurgency manual, and it's almost mirrors community-oriented policing in there. You know, like you have your kinetic approaches, like you're going to have to get your hands dirty, but it's, you know, General Kelly bringing in like, hey, we're not going to win this without local support. And
hearts and minds.
Hearts and minds, and then infrastructure. Like people are going to be upset if they don't have a job and they don't have water. Like we got to fix these things, and it's a 3-tiered approach, and it's the same thing no matter where we go. But we keep trying to rebrand it, like, oh, I have the new thing. It's hey, like let's just treat people like people and remember they have needs. Like, but there's ways we can help, and there's a way we can infuse it. But we got to be consistent in that.
I've had bad run-ins with police officers.
Me too. Yeah.
Everyone has. Not knowing my background, and I've gotten very frank with them, and maybe a cuss word or two, which sometimes they make the situation better. But that is human nature, and we saw it in the Marine Corps. We saw it in the SEALs. Is that when somebody feels that they've been endowed with power or the strength of an organization behind them, sometimes they treat people with disrespect.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's like the high school bully or the kid who got bullied in high school comes in, and now all of a sudden he's something different. And then there it's like, hey, man, like this guy might hurt you, and I might let him do that for a little bit just so you can remember, like, the streets are real. Like, violence is a normal human thing, and it's unforgiving. You know, physics and violence, they will let you know, like, in there, like, not, like it was Mike Tyson said, everyone's got to play until they get punched in the mouth. You know?
The most beautiful statement.
It is. And it's so true, you know? And it's kind of weird, like, so, for so long, he was kind of like trashes, you know, because of the way that he talked, and, like, he didn't think well, you know, just a dumb jock boxer. And, like, he's just dropping knowledge bombs left and right in his older age and stuff, and, like, the way that he talks.
He's about to drop Jake Paul.
I'm going to watch it.
First off, you know, the Paul brothers, they're genius.
Yeah,
pure genius. What they've done is that they're showmen, and they know it, and they're cashing in.
Oh, yeah.
But you can't deny Jake Paul in what he's accomplished.
Oh, yeah.
Out of not having a amateur boxing career, stepping in against some professional. So this one will be interesting, but it's Mike Tyson.
Oh,
it's Mike Tyson.
Yeah. My dad's almost 70, and he could still hurt me.
I still fear my dad.
Yeah. Oh, dude. My dad, when he was driving a tractor at 8, grew up on a farm, one of 10 kids in Kansas. Like,
dirt farmer.
Yeah, dude. He's just, you know, the only thing, like, what I've really learned from him, like, work hard. Hard work can get you a lot of things. But then it's like, also, there's like those times where, like, I'm missing my dad, and I was like, that could still hurt. Like, you know, like, he can still do that. I think a lot of people forget that. Like, just knowing, like, you can reach out and touch someone changes someone's attitude all of a sudden, you know, and that's just basic, you know, primal instinct, you know, like the animal kingdom is no different than we are. And then you see some people run their mouth, and then all of a sudden it becomes real, and they're like, oh, and that's like, treating people with disrespect. I was like, oh, it's always a no-go for me, you know, and you just don't know where they come from. Yeah.
It was the same thing within our organization. And especially, hey, because I'm a SEAL and you're a support guy, I can treat you with disrespect. Which, when you break it down from, hey, that guy, that admin rep over there, that intel rep, that logistics rep, unless you want to start doing their job, you better treat them with you better make them think like they walk on water, because they think that about you. Now, when you treat them even better, because technically you need something from them, and that's not what's driving you to treat them. I mean, they're human beings who want to be good at their job and have a sense of pride, and you're thankful for the support they lend you. They'll think you're Superman.
So you hit a critical point. So you can allow me some grace to segue to it. So I read General Mattis's book, and I got angry because I saw it is this easy. Like, it's mapped out. Like he says, there's nothing new under the sun. And then And I'd heard of Jocko in the books, and I was really standoffish. I was like, great, and, no disrespect, but another SEAL with another book and things, and you hear it, and then but then I was like, okay, I bit off on. I got real focused on my fitness, and so started doing the audiobooks, and I was like, man, okay, I already naturally like someone to do some of these things. Okay, and then I liked how I broke it down civilians' perspective, and then I started listening to podcasts and totally drank the juice. But that's then, one day I'm listening and I come across your podcast with you and George about your book, and just coming in there, and I was like, immediately, like I liked everything that it talked about, because that's what I think is the core issue that we are missing in policing, is that when it comes to recruiting and who we're going to put in there, we have gone to metrics like, have you been arrested for misdemeanors? If it has, how bad is it and how long ago is it? Have you ever done drugs? Like all these metrics that just cancel out a lot of people in the beginning. Like you already have a test, right? Some people aren't test takers. Like I was not that guy. Like I was in the middle of all the tests like I do. Like I'm a super average dude. Like nothing impressive.
Exceptionally mediocre.
Yeah. But you still find those people that like find the way, and what are their character attributes, and like what are we really getting? That's when, listening to your podcast and then reading your book, I read it once, studied it a second time, memorized it a third time. Like, it's the most gifted book that I've given to most people. I was like, this is the answer. And I went to my assistant chief, when it was given out, I was like, this is the answer to our industry, if not at least as an agency. Like all these problems like you're talking about, like with selection groups within the unit, like how are we going to make this unit better with all this turmoil, or what are we going to do with, this various section? Like this is it. And it was kind of to the wayside.
You remember, even the Marine Corps, mm-hmm. which there is no bigger melting pot. Where'd you go to boot camp? Pendleton?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
MCRD.
San Diego.
Yeah, San Diego, yeah.
It was the first, because I grew up in California, Northern California. We traveled, but the first exposure to such a diverse group of people.
Oh, yeah.
Guy from Kentucky, which literally nobody could understand. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest black guys I've ever met, who's like the sweetest dude from Louisiana. Guys from all the Midwest, Seattle. One of the guys, my ragmate didn't even speak English. And you're thrown together. And then when because you got nothing but time when the DIs aren't there, yeah. You get to know one another, and hey, where are you from, man? What was your family? Mm-hmm. Guys are like, yeah, no, I was a gangbanger. Mm-hmm. I was a gangbanger, and heard a lot of people didn't get in trouble with the law. And one guy's like, oh yeah, I sold drugs. I made a lot of money. And then a lot of them grow up or turn into exceptional Marines. Mm-hmm. Law enforcement is no different. I get you guys are regulated by the Civil Service Act, but it's when you use red flags to throw somebody out that, hey, this guy's a physical stud. His scores are high. He's clearly got some intellectual horsepower. He's just not been shown what right looks like. And that's what boot camp is. This is what right looks like. In the academy as well. But then you got to pour into them. So
selecting him. I really liked your phrase in the book is like, you got to change your mindset from looking from red flags to looking for green flags. And that's, in law enforcement, the problem we have is that we don't hire in someone who's great at PR. We fill it with another police officer who has to learn how to try and do that. Like they're not those things. And so when it comes to that, like we're hiring people who are background investigators. So they're looking at everything from a criminal standpoint. So what are they doing? They're looking for red flags, like the disqualifications. What am I going to get through here? Because they don't want to get something bad. Yeah. And so then when he gets to the academy, it's like, how are we going to foster? And they do a great job for like what they're given, because their goal is to, create recruits, not to eliminate people. Like we're all short. But like getting that mindset, the green flags, and looking in like, hey, yeah, here's his flaws, but like, here's the potential. Is he just not been shown how to meet that, or she, and stuff? And like starting that mentorship process in there that you guys really talk about in the book, and like screening and selecting, which then gets into your higher tier units. And, like our SWAT team, I think is second to none personally to everyone else, like with some of the stuff that they've done, their processes, their professionalism, their stoicness, like
I've met a few of them, and mm-hmm. I was highly impressed. Yeah. Especially, and again, I don't want to throw out his name. We both know who I'm talking about, mm-hmm. but just the emotional regulation, the mm-hmm. emotional intelligence in this guy is just, he's level the entire time. Mm-hmm. And this is one of your SWAT members. Just, and you're like, oh yeah, it totally segues to a tactical moment when he's got to pull the trigger. It's void of emotion, pure logic. He's making a very like sound decision. And I was highly impressed by that individual. And he former Army, if I believe.
There's so many prior service guys, but there's a lot of not prior service. Like they just have a great training pipeline, and it's they've bastardized a lot of deltas and y'all's processes. And when they posted you guys on your various squadrons, they come in, they really take that stuff in heart and they really refine it. And they're professionals by every sense of the mean of just like they won't accept your mediocre. Like it's your best every day. You got to show up, and and they're held like that. It's like when an officer makes it to there and they're in there, like they've really earned atonement for respect for that. Life. It's almost like it's got to get the SWAT blessing. It's like, oh yeah, he was in SWAT, a great guy. It's like it doesn't matter what he does after that. Like he was in SWAT in there, but like a lot of great dudes in there. Always so humble. Like I never wanted to be a part of a SWAT team until
How many people try out a year?
So they don't. That's it. Our turnover rate's extremely low.
But what's the selection rate in? How many people try out? 10% get selected. 15%.
0 if they don't meet the criteria. Like they've from I haven't seen a list like that, but they've talked about say, hey, no one meet, and they're very upfront. Like if you don't meet our criteria, like we don't have to take anyone, and they've chosen to work down officers because of maintaining that integrity in there. But I think at this point, like they've had some attrition, but like when guys get there, they really don't leave. And I think it's because of the culture they have within the team, and they love the work. Like you got to work for the people like you're with. Like yeah, you like the job and pay and so, whatever, but like you're there for the boys. Like you just want to go out and have fun.
Do they still have to do active patrols?
No, they're full time and they are busy. Like I don't know what the current numbers are for the last couple of years, but when they were running dynamic entry warrants, they ran 273 warrant operations, not including call outs. And they probably get called out 2 to 3 times a week now. Like it is not an MV life right now. Like just would crush a family if you're a single dad, with limited access or no child care plan. Like some of those guys, and they still find a way to make it work. And it's just like you don't find people like that a lot because it's easy to just do bare minimum. Like because their pay doesn't change if they go to patrol, their pay rate doesn't change. They get a lot of these things, but it's the environment, the people that want the work, and to me, what really changed my opinion to like, what would be worth the sacrifice for that is I was coming out of a class, and you would see the Bearcat and a bunch of SWAT trucks running lights and sirens out, and they're an unmarked car, so that's not typical. Like it has to be a very specific situation for them to do that. And we turn on the radio and ask one of the guys who were out on the field, hey, SWAT just ran out of your Bearcat code. Like what's going on? And I'm like, hey, there's a hostage situation on the west side. Like it's happened. Like that's where they're going. We're trying to get there. They were way north.
To save a life.
After saved 5. Like they had 5 hostages. And doing hostage work worldwide, like you saved 3, that's a great day. They did it. They executed and were able to neutralize the hostage taker. For what it was. This guy had shot at cops. He shot at the Bearcat. He shot through a door. One of the teammates I have currently on my team, he was holding a ballistic shield that stopped it, and it was just kind of one of those things that like I think he just shot the shield. But like the exposure of those kinetic events isn't enough for you to be like, oh yeah, you're getting shot at. Like this is, like this is zing, that's pop, that that type of stuff. And so, they were all. Well, what I think it was a saving grace is that they were already prepped to serve a warrant then. So like a lot of the equipment was consolidated. So like luck had a thing.
Rapid response.
Yeah. So there was no like, hey, get the Bearcat, you got to get these things. It was just they were already lined up, ready to go out. But what I think a lot of people overlook was the countless hours of training. They're like, oh, well, they don't need this equipment. It's really expensive. Like, I was like, well, because that equipment holds up to the 300 reps that it took to get to do this thing like really well. And like, then they did it. To me, it secured their funding for, generations because of that. This guy shot at 2 police officers that are out in their streets. So he had 2 pinned in vehicles. Like they had to use a Bearcat to rescue them. Then he shot through the door with other officers there. And then he's got, children in there, like they're less than 18, like most of the victims in there, and they were able to get in and do their thing, and it wasn't easy. And like this is like the thing they do, and they did it and they executed because they trained for it. And then it's like you see that and you're like, that's worth it. That level of it, okay, that would make it worth losing time with your kid. It's time you can't get back because that's the level of investment that everyone's in on. and just hearing like how they were all doing it, I was like, cool. Like that's something I wish I could have been able to be more part of, you know, when I was younger in my career.
Again, to the point, you guys don't tell that story. You don't put one of those SWAT guys to explain what SWAT does, how often they're activated,
I'll tell you
why they train to this standard, why the funding is required, and how many lives we've saved.
They don't do it on like a public. They have a SWAT support group that on social media that they push out, which is pretty cool. Like they do a good job like on that. But again, like when it goes to like your not like your support assets, like they do. I try to plagiarize everything off of their processes, like for my unit, which you know previously.
And can you mention your unit, because your unit is unique?
Yes. So man, we are really unique for our department.
I think I have the patch. The patch is somewhere in here.
Oh yeah, I gave you a couple. Actually, I was going to bring you one, but then I realized I already gave you some. But we're violent crime unit. There's about 60 of us all together. You know, each division has its own, and it started in the 90s as weed and seed, and then turned into zero tolerance, which was, you know, like if these guys they have a zero tolerance to the thing. If they stop you and you're doing something illegal, you're going to go to jail, which can cause a lot of collateral damage. And over time, what we look like is, you know, you get a bunch of guys driving in a straight line, all wearing the same stuff, you know, really looks like a convoy, which then looks like you're taking over an invasion, like making it. And so it's like, okay, I can kind of see that. Like, what we're not saying is like, well, this has all my equipment. And like it's hard to double up and still have space and to be active. You know, what if all these different things and personnel, manpower? But again, we could do that better. And we have gotten better with it, and we've been held to a higher standard. You know, we had a lieutenant come in and he asked for autonomy and he asked for resources, and he was great at doing it, and he got it. And we're just rock and rolling. We're doing great jobs. We're not violating policy any more than what would be an acceptable range of just, you know, the dynamic application of what we have to do in the moment. Like that's what's really tough. And we're doing it good. You know, I've been in multiple car chases for over an hour and never heard any lashback on policy of like, hey, well, you know, why were some of this or doing that? Yeah. Because we were following, but it was like for the right reasons. Like it wasn't just for, you know, speeding, but we're also able to communicate it, and that really goes back into, you know, that team accountability. Like, hey, man, like if you're gonna don't be upset that you were canceled. You didn't provide the information you needed to be allowed to, and that's kind of just the standard we've been put in that. And then we had a big change in the culture. Like he came in and he was like, hey, this is standard. You're not meeting it. Gone. And there was, you know, it was like the red wedding, man. Like guys were getting cut left and right. And it was needed for the revamp, and we got refilled and in there, and really created a stronger relationship with SWAT, because they do a lot of the training, like for some of like the more active shooter type stuff. And, you know, trying to plagiarize some of their processes, like when it comes to logistical support, is like, they do like a show and tell with all the finance people. You know, the guys who just push paper, like they don't know what any of this stuff is. But when you come down and you let them hold it, and like, hey, this is what, when you approve this is what we get, and this makes us safer. Now they feel a part of the team, and like they're just great. Like the way that they're very calculated, but you know, they are very stoic. They are very, like, nothing leaves the family. You don't ever hear their drama. Like it's all here. You know, and they show up and they do good work, and then they leave, and it's just kind of one of those things. Like, this is what we do. Like, you're gonna do the same thing we do every day, Pinky. And so it's really something to marvel at when it comes like to achieving that. And it's like, hey, they're just process. We can mimic this, and our unit slowly gotten there. We just outnumber them twice. Like, I was at a recent school where I've been in more SWAT-like situations, initiated more of those than a lot of these part-time teams that initiate, and they're like, we got 7. You know, that's all we got. You know, but we don't have that SWAT designator, so it's kind of like we're not, but we are. We're kind of mediary. We got to explain it, but
you guys are like Rangers.
Kind of, yeah. We go wherever it is. Like, it's kind of the way I've equated, like, to not even compare us to, you know, what you guys have done, but like, you know, we got 6 teams, and it's kind of like a SEAL team. Like, we're low in numbers, and we can deploy rapidly. Because of our nature, we don't get to bring as much equipment, but like our SWAT, kind of like a Ranger battalion. Like, they're going to bring everyone, and they're going to bring everything, and nothing is going to get unbroken. Like, it's all going to be broken, and then they're going to leave, and they're going to be professional about it. And it's just kind of one of those stuff that they do. Now the caliber of like the officers and, what we go through is in there, but it's been kind of a trend that a lot of guys who have been made it into SWAT has come from our unit. And I think that's kind of the direction where the management is wanting to go, is like have us be a stepping stone. I think if you were to get it his way, maybe, but it doesn't preclude anyone
from trying
a certain minimum. Yeah. And they do. And
it becomes a feeder, as we said. And
hopefully,
yes.
I mean, if you could, but they've had some good steals recently, and talk about manning issues, like lateral officers, coming from different agencies and stuff. Man, we're getting some guys with some great caliber, and they're competitive and they're hungry because they want that opportunity too, because they see it, and it's a great tool. I probably know 15 guys recently that left their department to come to us for an opportunity, right? So what kind of commitment are they into?
So you'd mentioned the lieutenant who took over, who wanted autonomy. It is a great sort of, let's call it nugget here. One, you don't get that autonomy unless you have the trust. You've earned it. I'm sure he's earned it.
He's earned a lot of trust. He's very well respected.
But you also mentioned something about communication, and hey, you were canceled because you weren't communicating. Communication is 9/10 of every solution. It always is. And one of the things I remember, and I had to evolve because I just wanted to get authority to go do something and leave me alone. Yeah. Well, that's not working all that well. And my boss is in my Wheaties. I remember when I moved up to my next unit, I was so shocked by how well the guys could communicate in the field. So I started listening to the Rangers, and I started listening to the Army equivalent and even our equivalent, sitting in Afghanistan, just listening to their operations and taking down notes about how the GFCs, is what they're called, ground forces commanders, were communicating. And I took from all the elements, and I created my own playbook. You have to convey, and it's the same thing with messaging to the public. You've got to tell a story, both during kinetic operations and also back in the rear, as we say, to gain the support and trust, to get that autonomy. But the better story I told, and I'm not patting myself on the back here, but I was told to, within even my element, hey, you need to go train that fellow officer to be a better GFC and talk to him about the communication. Is you would tell a story to arm your bosses with as much information as possible, sometimes over-communicate. And I would rather over-communicate than under-communicate. Just like you talked about veterans who come in who can have a bias for action, I'd rather have to pull somebody back than push them forward.
Yeah,
it irritates me when I have to push people forward. Like, hey, show some pride, show some initiative, show some aggression. Yes. Yeah. But I mean, it got to a point where I'd paint the story in the field and say, this is what I intend to do. Out. I'm not asking for a response.
Yeah.
And I never got another transmission on the radio like, hey, Mike, have you considered this? Have you considered? Nope. They're like, I trust him. He's going to make the right call.
Yeah.
And then my career ends, and that was over. And I really did enjoy that. It is so nerdy to say that, one, you got guys like Sully and 40 of them who are more equipped to fight the fight. I loved the radio. I loved it. I mean, I was rare in terms of officers. I don't know if you ever seen that picture. It was like people went crazy because I've got that omnidirectional SAT antenna, which no officers carried because they would usually have an assigned radio man. I'm like, no, I'm carrying the SAT because I don't want to have to go through you, plug in, and I'm going direct to the commander, going direct through SATCOM. But, well, guys, Lee, thank you for coming down.
Yeah,
I'm going to say we are behind you guys. I feel safe because of guys like you who are in it daily, where we got to go over there for 4 months and we're in it, come back and chill. Well, we weren't chilling for 12 months. We were training hard, but you guys are the reason that law and order is maintained in this nation. I know we're at a weird time, let's put it there, and it will correct. There's no way that this can continue, and I think logical Americans.
We have it pretty good where we're at, so I'm very grateful and thankful for our base. For A could be, and there's some departments that are in way worse shape, so I'm very grateful.
This is what I would say, guys. You see cops or firemen on the street, just go up and say, "Thank you for what you do," and what can I do for you guys? Hey, can you donate to the police association or this or absolutely, absolutely,
so many different things.
Perfect. Well, dude, thank you for coming down to Fort Worth. Thank you to all law enforcement and brother. You guys are badasses. All right, guys. This is another episode of the Men's Journal Everyday Warrior podcast. Again, remember, go leave a review. We actually read them. That's how we get better. And hey, do me a favor. Go pick up the Everyday Warrior book, A No-Hack Practical Approach to Life. I think you guys will like it. It ain't about me. It's me talking about guys like Lee and all the guys I served with about where or what I saw them do on a daily basis, habits, routines that made them wildly successful. And I'm still trying to emulate. All right, guys, out here.